You understand why you can't come, don't you, Amelia? My mother said, her tone as calm as if she were discussing the weather forecast. The words floated in the air between us, light and polite, but they landed like glass, shattering inside my chest. Sienna's dream wedding isn't about you, she continued, smoothing the silk sleeve of her pale blue blouse. It's about her perfect day, and honestly, you'd just make things complicated. For a moment I couldn't speak. The Pasadena afternoon light spilled through the French windows, catching the gold frames of our family photos, every one of them featuring Sienna in the center, me somewhere near the edge, smiling too hard to look like I belonged. I sat there stiff on the velvet couch, trying to breathe. Complicated, how I asked finally. Mom sighed, the kind of sigh that meant she pitied me for not understanding the obvious. Sienna has invited 400 guests. Everyone important will be there. The governor's wife, the Grants, the investors. This is the kind of event that shapes reputations. She's wearing a Vera Wang couture gown. They're spending $600,000 on the venue alone. You can see how your presence might shift the tone. I forced my voice to stay steady. Because I'm not like them, her eyes flicked up to mine, soft but sharp. You've always had a way of making people uncomfortable, darling. You're too outspoken, too independent. It's not a bad thing, but this isn't about you proving a point. It's about harmony. Harmony. That was her word for control. I looked around the living room, white marble floors, crystal chandeliers, the scent of lilac diffusers carefully placed on the table. Every inch of this house screamed perfection. I had grown up trying to fit into its symmetry and never quite managed. My mother's smile didn't falter once, as she crossed her legs, still holding the posture of a woman who had mastered appearances. I didn't realize family could be optional, I said quietly. Oh, Amelia, don't dramatize. We discussed it as a family, and your father agrees it's for the best. Of course he did. He always did. I stood slowly smoothing my skirt, even though my hands were trembling. When's the wedding? June 17th, she said, her voice lifting a little with excitement. At the Grant estate in Napa. But I really think I just wanted to know the date. She blinked, perhaps surprised I didn't argue. Well, I'm glad you understand. You've always been so sensible. Sensible, her favorite word for obedient. I nodded, turning toward the door. My heels echoed softly on the polished floor. Just before I stepped outside, she added, You should be happy for her. Maxwell is a wonderful man. She's very lucky. I didn't turn around. Yes, she is. The California sun hit me hard as I stepped onto the driveway. For a second, I had to close my eyes, breathing in the scent of orange blossoms from the garden. My chest felt tight, not from anger exactly, but from clarity, sharp, cold clarity. They weren't just excluding me, they were erasing me again. I got into my car and sat there for a long minute, gripping the steering wheel. Inside the house, I could almost hear the clinking of teacups, the measured laughter, the pretense of civility. My mother would be texting Sienna right now, I told her. She took it well. Like a pill meant to dull the pain. I started the engine and pulled away the house, shrinking in the rearview mirror, until it was just a gleaming facade, a museum of my childhood. Driving down the tree-lined street, I thought about every moment that had led to this. How Sienna had always been the golden child, charming, polished, camera-ready since the age of 5. And me? The one with scraped knees and paint on her jeans, more interested in sketching buildings than attending debutante balls. When I got my architecture degree from UCLA, my parents said, That's nice. When Sienna got a sponsorship deal on Instagram, they threw a party. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A message from Sienna Mom said you understood. Thanks for being mature about it. Nothing personal. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Nothing personal. I pulled into a quiet overlook above the city and turned off the car. The sky stretched wide and gold, the sun beginning to dip behind the hills. Somewhere below, Sienna's world was spinning wedding planners, guest lists, photo shoots, and imported flowers. In that world, I didn't exist. My phone buzzed again, this time from Ethan. Still at your parents'. Want me to pick you up for dinner? I hesitated, then typed back, I'm fine. Just need some air, he replied almost instantly. Okay. Look at this view though. A photo popped up, a stretch of turquoise water under a glowing sunset. Hawaii. Thinking we could use a getaway soon. I looked at that photo for a long time. The horizon endless and quiet, a place untouched by expectations. I imagined standing there barefoot, no makeup, no pressure to smile for anyone's approval, just light salt air and freedom. For the first time that day, something shifted inside me. Not rage, something cooler, steadier. Resolve. They could have their $600,000 Napa wedding with their designer gowns and perfect guest list. They could pose under chandeliers and pretend it meant happiness. But I was done waiting for invitations to matter. As I drove home through the golden haze of late afternoon, I felt oddly calm. I passed the sign for the airport and smiled to myself. Maybe I didn't belong in their version of perfection. Maybe I never would. But somewhere out there, maybe on an island surrounded by blue, I could write my own version of beautiful. That night, as I packed away my drafting tools and poured a glass of wine, I opened Ethan's photo again. Hawaii glowed on my screen, gold light, endless sea possibility. I saved it to a folder called June. If they thought I'd disappear quietly, they were wrong. Because this time, silence would speak louder than any confrontation. When I got home that night, the city felt too bright, too alive for the quiet ache sitting inside me. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, the sound of traffic faint through the window. My apartment was small but peaceful, soft lamplight ocean air drifting in from the balcony. I kicked off my heels and poured a glass of wine, though my throat felt too tight to swallow. The humiliation hadn't fully hit me yet. It was still hovering heavy and cold, waiting to sink in. My phone buzzed. 3 unread messages from friends asking, "Are you going to Sienna's wedding?" I saw her post. "It looks huge." I didn't respond. The next notification made my stomach twist, a PR email from Sienna's assistant, a girl I'd never met. "Please avoid posting family photos until after the wedding weekend to maintain privacy for media coverage." Media coverage. They didn't even have the decency to exclude me privately. They had to send a reminder to stay invisible. I sat by the window watching lights flicker across the skyline. My reflection in the glass looked distant, like a stranger. "What is it about me that embarrasses them so much?" I whispered. Maybe it was an embarrassment. Maybe it was fear. Fear that I didn't fit neatly into the image they wanted the world to see. The question pulled me backward into a part of my mind I hadn't visited in years. I could almost smell the jasmine that used to grow in our Pasadena backyard. I was 10 then, Sienna only 7. She was playing the piano, hitting every note with confidence while Mom clapped enthusiastically. I sat cross-legged on the patio, sketching the outline of our house with my dull pencil. "Sweetheart," Mom called. "Come, watch your sister's performance. She's getting so talented." I held up my sketchbook. "Look, Mom, I drew our house." She glanced over her shoulder, smiled vaguely, and said, "That's nice, darling. Maybe you can design her concert hall someday." Then she went back to Sienna, who was already practicing her bow. Even then I understood the hierarchy. Sienna was sparkle, I was shadow. The golden child and the practical one. Every family needs both, I suppose. Years later in college, I won a scholarship for an architecture project, a community library design that got featured in a local magazine. I invited my parents to the award ceremony. The night before, Mom called. "We can't make it, honey. Sienna has her first brand event in LA, and she's nervous." "You understand, right?" I said. I did. I always did. The next day I stood on stage smiling at the audience while the empty seats in the front row stared back at me. After graduation, I tried to tell myself that I didn't care. I had my own life, my own dreams. I rented a small apartment in San Diego, built my own firm from nothing, spent weekends photographing coastal architecture. But each holiday dinner reminded me that I was still an afterthought. The last Christmas before Sienna's engagement was the hardest. We were gathered around the dining table, the chandelier throwing warm light across the crystal glasses. Dad carved the roast, while Mom handed out napkins embroidered with the letter G, a hint of the Grant family's involvement long before the official announcement. Sienna, glowing as always, stood to make a toast. Maxwell proposed. She squealed, flashing a diamond the size of a grape. Everyone erupted into applause. I waited for the noise to settle before I said Ethan and I are engaged too. My words barely cut through the laughter. Mom glanced at me, smiling absently. "That's lovely, dear. Congratulations." Then she turned back to Sienna. "Show me that ring again, sweetheart. Oh, it's exquisite." They toasted to Sienna and Maxwell's future. I raised my glass quietly, my champagne flat on my tongue. Ethan reached under the table and squeezed my hand. I smiled, but inside something small and fragile cracked. That memory replayed now, sitting in my dimly lit apartment, the city humming outside. I reached for the photo album on my bookshelf, a habit I hadn't indulged in years. The cover creaked open. Every page told the same story, Sienna in the middle beaming, me on the side blurred or half-cropped. In one, Mom's arm draped protectively around Sienna, while my own shoulder barely made it into the frame. I closed the album. My chest felt hollow, but the tears didn't come. I was done crying for people who never noticed when I disappeared. A knock at the door startled me. Ethan stepped in, tall and calm, holding takeout from the Thai place down the street. "Hey," he said softly, setting the bags down. "You okay?" I tried to smile. "Define okay." He leaned against the counter. "I take a dinner with your mom. Didn't go great. They disinvited me," I said flatly. He blinked. From the wedding, I nodded. Apparently my presence would make things complicated. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak right away. He just exhaled slowly. "You don't need their approval to belong somewhere, Amelia. You've built your own life. You have your own worth." I looked at him. "You say that like it's simple." "It is simple," he said, his voice steady. "It's just not easy." For a moment, silence filled the room, thick but not uncomfortable. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and showed me a picture of a beach at sunset, waves glowing pink under fading light. "I'm flying to Hawaii next week for a quick meeting about an investment property. Thought you might want to come. Get away from all this noise." I laughed quietly. Running away from my family's drama sounds tempting. "Not running," he said. "Resetting." I tilted my head. "You make it sound poetic," he smiled. "You could bring your camera. Capture something beautiful that's just yours." Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was the tenderness in his voice, but the idea lingered long after he left that night. A trip, a breath of fresh air, a chance to be unseen, but this time by choice. Later I stepped onto my balcony, the air cool against my skin. Below, the Pacific shimmered dark and endless, stretching toward the horizon. I thought of the ocean near Oahu, where the water was lighter, the sand almost white. I imagined standing there, barefoot hair, loose camera in hand. No rules, no judgments, just light and truth. I whispered into the night. Maybe it's time I stop waiting to be invited. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, restless. I made coffee and sat at my desk, sketching aimlessly on tracing paper. Shapes turned into outlines of palm trees, the curve of a shoreline, the silhouette of a woman standing alone in sunlight. The woman looked like me. For the first time in years, the drawing made me smile. By noon, I had stopped pretending that the idea wasn't taking shape in my mind. I opened my laptop and started looking at flights to Honolulu. Round trip, mid-June, just a few days apart from their wedding date. Perfect. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If they wanted me out of sight, I'd give them exactly that, but on my own terms. Not hiding, not sulking. Living. Creating. That night I called Ethan again. "About Hawaii," I said. "Let's do it." His voice warmed. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure." When I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of invisibility was still there, but it was shifting, turning into something sharper, focus, maybe even power. As the sun set beyond the window, the sky flushed pink and gold. I watched the light spread and thought of all the times I'd been told to dim myself so Sienna could shine brighter. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe I was never meant to stay small. I closed my sketchbook and wrote one line on the page. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's the audacity to be seen. Then I underlined it twice. The morning after sunlight poured through my blinds like it had something to prove. I sat at the kitchen counter staring at my phone thumb frozen above the screen. Sienna's social media feed was a flood of pastel perfection her bridal shower weekend. There she was framed by pink balloons spelling bride-to-be, surrounded by friends in matching silk robes, everyone smiling just right. Mom was in half the photos, of course, wearing pearls, and the expression of a woman who had produced royalty. Under one photo she'd commented, "So proud of our beautiful bride-to-be." I scrolled further and found the group picture. My entire family was their parents, cousins, grandparents. My chair, the one I'd always sat in at family gatherings, was visible in the corner, empty. They hadn't even moved it out of frame. Something inside me clicked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small, clean break. I put the phone face down and whispered, "All right then, I'm done watching." Around 9, Ethan showed up at my door with 2 coffees and a brown paper bag that smelled like sugar. "You look like you need something sweet," he said, setting it down. His voice was casual, but his eyes searched mine. Rough morning, I slid the phone toward him. They're celebrating again. Without me, of course. He took one look at the screen and shook his head. "You don't have to torture yourself, you know." "I'm not torturing myself," I said. "I'm just taking note. I think I needed to see it clearly." Ethan poured cream into his coffee. "You've spent your whole life letting them define what's worth celebrating. Maybe it's time to define it yourself." I sighed, staring at the steam rising from my cup. They built a world that only has room for one daughter. "Then build your own," he said simply. He told me he'd been invited to a private investor retreat in Hawaii the following month, a beachfront villa. Small group, no cameras, no noise. "Come with me," he said, leaning forward. "No expectations, just a reset. You could bring your camera, unwind a little." I hesitated. Running away feels like letting them win. Ethan smiled faintly. "It's not running if you're walking towards something better." That sentence lingered long after he left. I spent the rest of the afternoon pretending to work, but my concentration was gone. I wandered into my closet, more to distract myself than anything else, and my fingers brushed against a fabric bag I hadn't touched in 2 years. The ivory silk dress. I had bought it for Sienna's engagement party, but when I showed it to her, she'd laughed. "White isn't your color," she said. "It draws too much attention." I remember folding it back into the bag, swallowing the sting. I never wore it. Now I pulled it out and held it against my body. The fabric caught the light in a way that made my skin glow. It fit perfectly, maybe even better than it had back then. For a moment, I saw myself not as the older sister in the background, but as someone who could take up space without apology. "Maybe she was right," I murmured to the mirror. "Maybe it does draw attention." I smiled. Good. That night, I couldn't sleep. The dress hung on the back of my closet door like a silent dare. Around midnight, I gave up on trying to ignore it and sat down at my laptop. My fingers moved without hesitation, searching flights to Honolulu, then resorts on the North Shore. I found one that caught my breath, Kaya Cove Resort, perched on a cliff overlooking turquoise waves. They offered something called a personal celebration package, a private photo session, floral arrangements, and a symbolic ceremony for milestones of independence. Independence. That word pulsed through me like a heartbeat. I clicked inquire. An email reply came within hours from someone named Leilani, the event planner. "Aloha, Amelia. I'd be honored to help you celebrate this new chapter. We can customize every detail. The sunrise light here is truly unforgettable." Her message felt genuine, warm, something I hadn't felt from my own family in years. I booked the package, the flights, the villa. No hesitation. It wasn't about revenge. At least that's what I told myself. It was about freedom. Still, I couldn't deny the small, delicious irony of it all. While Sienna's wedding planners built a six-figure fantasy in Napa, I was crafting something real, a moment that didn't need an audience to matter. The next day, I found myself drifting back into memory again. I was 17, standing in the school auditorium, clutching a model of the eco-home I'd designed for a statewide competition. It was the proudest I'd ever been. Mom and Sienna had promised to come. Just as I was about to present, the doors opened. Sienna stumbled in, dramatically claiming she'd twisted her ankle in dance class. The room turned toward her teachers, rushing to help. By the time the attention settled again, the judges had already moved on to the next student. I never finished presenting. Sienna hadn't done it out of malice. She didn't need to. She simply assumed the spotlight was hers by default. I had spent my whole life letting her have it. Not anymore. That evening, Ethan and I went out to dinner by the pier. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, the waves whispering against the rocks. So he said, glancing over his glass of wine. "Are you coming with me to Hawaii?" "I am," I said. Then I smiled. "But not just as your +1. He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I booked something, a personal celebration shoot. A dress, flowers, the whole thing. I want to make it a moment." He leaned back, a slow grin spreading across his face. "You want to get married there?" "Not yet," I said, laughing softly. "I just want to look like I already belong to something beautiful." "You already do," he said, his voice gentle. That was the first time in weeks that I laughed without bitterness. The sound surprised me. It felt healing. When we left the restaurant, the ocean breeze tangled my hair. I thought of Sienna's Napa wedding, crystal chandeliers, choreographed dances, hundreds of guests. Then I pictured the opposite dawn light spilling across an empty beach, no audience, no applause. Just me, the man who loved me, and the sound of waves as a witness. Maybe that was what freedom looked like. Later that night, I began to pack. I folded the ivory dress carefully, laying it on top of the suitcase. Then my eyes caught the small wooden box on my dresser. Inside was a photograph me at 7 years old, sitting cross-legged in the grass, paint-stained fingers, holding up a crooked little house I'd built from cardboard. My smile was huge, unguarded. That girl had wanted nothing more than to be seen. I tucked the photo between the folds of my dress. For years I had believed their narrative that I was too much, too different, too visible. But maybe that had never been the problem. Maybe their world was just too small to hold me. When I turned off the light, the apartment glowed faintly from the city outside. My suitcase sat by the door ready. I exhaled slowly, feeling something uncoil inside me. Tomorrow I would board a plane to Hawaii. Tomorrow I would start rewriting my story. The morning light slid gently across my kitchen counter, soft and golden, like it didn't know yesterday, had already changed everything. I sat there with my coffee, no makeup, hair tied up, feeling strangely calm. The air was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the seagulls crying outside. It felt like the pause between chapters, the moment before life turned a page. My inbox pinged, and there it was, a new message from Leilani. "Aloha, Amelia. We've confirmed your reservation for June 16th. The sunrise package will begin at 5:30 a.m. I can recommend 2 photographers, both specialize in intimate shoots focused on personal milestones. Let me know your preference." I smiled, the first real smile that hadn't been forced in weeks. I typed back, "Thank you. I'd like to go with the quieter one, the one who understands natural light." That sentence felt like a small act of rebellion. No drama, no audience, just light. I sipped my coffee and stared at my reflection in the glass door. For the first time, I didn't look like someone who'd been excluded. I looked like someone about to begin. By noon, I decided to get the dress altered. It had waited too long in the shadows. I carried it carefully down the street to a small tailor shop I'd passed 100 times but never entered. Inside, the air smelled like fabric and lavender. An older woman looked up from her sewing machine. Her silver hair was pinned neatly, her fingers nimble and steady. "What can I do for you, dear?" I unzipped the garment bag and lifted the ivory silk dress. It shimmered softly under the light, delicate but strong. "I need a few adjustments. I'm wearing it for something special." Her eyes lit up. A wedding? I hesitated, then smiled. "Something like that." She nodded as if she understood more than I'd said. "Sometimes the most beautiful celebrations are the ones nobody expects." Her words lingered. I stood still while she pinned the fabric around my waist, her hands gentle but confident. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, barefoot, hair loose, dress hugging my frame, it struck me how different I looked. I wasn't dressing for approval anymore. I was dressing for ownership. When I left the shop, the sun was warm on my face. The wind caught the edge of the garment bag and made it flutter behind me like a small white flag of surrender. But this wasn't surrender. This was declaration. That evening, I opened my laptop and began planning in earnest. A local hairstylist in Honolulu booked, a small bouquet of white orchids ordered, a pearl bracelet from a local artisan purchased. The simple beauty of it all made me feel powerful. Every detail was mine. No committees, no bridesmaids, no one second-guessing my taste. Just me deciding what beauty meant. I made a folder on my desktop titled New Beginnings. Inside it, I saved screenshots of everything: the resort, the flowers, the ocean. The sight of it calmed me, like I was piecing together something sacred. Later that night, I called Kara. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright as ever. "Tell me everything. You sound lighter already." "I'm going to Hawaii," I said. She gasped. "For the investor thing, yes. But also, for something else. I booked a solo shoot." "You mean like a wedding shoot without the wedding?" "Exactly that." There was a pause, then laughter. "I love it. 2 weddings the same weekend, hers for the audience, yours for the soul. That's the idea." "I should come," she said, half joking. I smiled. "You'll see the pictures soon enough." Kara's tone softened. "You know, I think this is the most you thing you've ever done. You're not fighting back, you're just choosing yourself. That's the real revenge." Her words hit deeper than I expected. When we hung up, I stared at the city lights outside my window and felt something loosen in my chest. For so long, I'd mistaken silence for peace. But peace wasn't silence, it was freedom. That night, I dreamed of waves, of standing barefoot in warm sand while the horizon blazed gold and the world was quiet enough to hear my own breath. The next morning, I woke early, restless but excited. I went through my day like someone preparing for a quiet revolution. I washed the dress one more time, ironed the folds smooth, and slipped it into its garment bag. I packed my sketchbook, my favorite camera lens, and a small notebook labeled June. Inside, I wrote just one line: "Find the light and stand in it." That afternoon, I got a call from my mother. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted closure. "Amelia," she said, her tone perfectly polite, as if nothing had happened. "We're finalizing the seating chart. Are you sure you're not available that weekend?" I closed my eyes. "I'm sure." "Well, it's such a shame. Sienna wanted everything perfect. I hope you understand it's not personal." There it was again. Not personal. The phrase they use to excuse every cruelty. "I understand," I said. My voice was steady now, not cold, not bitter. "Just done." "Good," she replied briskly. "We'll send you photos afterward." "I'll be somewhere else," I said softly. "What do you mean?" But I'd already ended the call. I deleted the voicemail she left a few minutes later and felt lighter for it. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was clean. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window watching the sky turn amber. My suitcase lay open on the bed, half-packed. The air smelled faintly of jasmine from the garden below. I thought about everything they'd ever told me. Don't draw too much attention. Don't make things complicated. Don't overshadow your sister. And for years, I'd listened. I'd made myself smaller to make them comfortable. Not anymore. They could have their chandeliers, their designer gowns, their orchestrated perfection. I would have the sun, the ocean, the wind in my hair. I would have my own light. I folded the ivory dress carefully and placed the photo of my younger self beside it. Then I zipped the suitcase and set it by the door. As the night deepened, the phone buzzed once more. A text from Ethan Carr's coming at 6. "Don't pack stress. I've got that covered." I smiled and typed back, only bringing peace this time. Before bed, I stepped out onto the balcony one last time. The Pacific shimmered under the moonlight, vast and endless. Somewhere across that water was a new beginning waiting for me. I took a deep breath and whispered, "They taught me to stay small. Hawaii will teach me how to take up space." Then I turned off the light. The suitcase waited in the dark, a promise ready to be fulfilled. At the airport, the sound of rolling suitcases and distant announcements felt almost musical, like background noise to a life I'd already started shedding. I sat by the gate with a cup of coffee, scrolling through my phone, watching Sienna's wedding unfold on every possible platform. There she was, flawless in her silk robe, surrounded by bridesmaids laughing into champagne glasses. Mom stood behind her, adjusting the veil like a royal attendant. The captions were all the same. "The wedding of the decade. The Grants and the Blakes unite in style. Perfection personified." I stared at the photos without envy this time, just an odd, detached fascination. She had everything she wanted: glamour, applause, validation. And yet, even through the filter-perfect images, I could see that flicker of strain behind her smile. I whispered to myself, "They don't even know they've already lost me." A soft boarding announcement cut through the terminal noise. I closed the app, slipped my phone into my bag, and followed the crowd onto the plane. As I fastened my seatbelt, my mind drifted back to 6 months earlier, the dinner that started it all. It was held on a rooftop restaurant in Beverly Hills, one of those places where everyone talks too loudly just to be overheard. Sienna had organized it to announce her engagement to Maxwell Grant, heir to a real estate empire. And a man so polished he looked like he came straight out of a luxury catalog. Mom had been radiant, practically glowing under the soft lighting. Dad beamed with quiet pride. I remembered sitting across from them, swirling wine in my glass, feeling invisible in plain sight. When Sienna lifted her hand to show the ring, Mom gasped dramatically. "Oh, sweetheart, it's exquisite. Maxwell has such wonderful taste." She turned toward me, her tone softening, but her smile still sharp. "And how's your Ethan doing? I imagine he's very busy." "He's fine," I said. "He's working on a new project." Sienna leaned forward, voice sweet but edged. "You're lucky he's so patient with you. Not many men could handle such an independent woman." Everyone laughed politely. I laughed too, because what else was there to do? But I remember thinking, they don't want a sister at this table. They want an audience. The clink of glasses, the shimmer of city lights, it was all theater. And I was the understudy who never got called on stage. The memory faded as the plane lifted through the clouds. I leaned back, feeling the vibration of takeoff in my bones. Ethan glanced over from the window seat. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, though my heart was heavy with something I couldn't quite name. "You don't have to look," he said, nodding toward the phone, still in my lap. "I'm not looking to hurt," I said softly. "I'm looking to remember." He reached for my hand. "Let's make sure the next thing you remember is sunlight." I turned toward him and smiled. That was Ethan, steady, grounded, real, the opposite of everything my family valued. As we crossed into open sky, I watched the sunlight break through the clouds, golden and soft, and felt a strange peace settle over me. Somewhere below, my sister was stepping into her perfect world of chandeliers and photographers. Somewhere above, I was flying towards something real. Mid-flight, I made the mistake of checking my messages. The family group chat was buzzing. "Dad, everyone's arriving. The venue looks amazing. Mom, wish you were here, darling, but it's truly for the best." Sienna sent a heart emoji, just one, no words, no warmth. I stared at the screen for a long time, then tapped leave conversation. There was a small, satisfying finality in the gesture, like closing a door I should have locked years ago. Ethan noticed and smiled faintly. Good, he said. You don't need that noise. Outside the window, the sky deepened to a rich, endless blue. I pressed my forehead to the glass, whispering to myself, You made sure I wouldn't be there. Now I'm making sure you can't reach me. The hours blurred into quiet, comfort-soft music, the rhythm of air currents, Ethan's hand resting gently on mine. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of water, clear, endless, forgiving. When I woke, the captain was announcing our descent into Honolulu. Through the small oval window, I saw a stretch of turquoise ocean shimmering like liquid glass. My chest tightened with awe. The moment we stepped off the plane, warm air wrapped around me like a living thing. The scent of plumeria and sea salt filled my lungs, and I exhaled everything heavy I'd carried from California. A text from Leilani awaited me, Aloha Amelia. Welcome to Kaya Cove. The sunrise here is breathtaking. See you soon. Breathtaking. Yes, it already was. Ethan handled the luggage while I stood at the exit, eyes closed, letting the humid wind tangle through my hair. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I felt present. The drive to the resort was a slow unraveling of everything I used to be. Palm trees swayed lazily over narrow coastal roads. Locals smiled as they passed, and the ocean never stopped moving beside us. I watched sunlight flicker across Ethan's face and thought, this is what peace looks like. When we reached Kaya Cove, I could barely breathe from the beauty of it. White bungalows nestled in lush greenery, the sound of waves breaking just beyond a stretch of coral sand. The air was alive with birdsong and distant laughter. Leilani greeted us at the entrance, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a calm presence that felt instantly familiar. Aloha Amelia, she said, taking my hands in hers. We're honored to have you. Her words felt heavier than hospitality, they felt like permission. My suite overlooked the water. The first thing I did was unpack the ivory dress, laying it across the bed. In the late afternoon light, it looked almost golden. I traced the delicate stitching with my fingertips and smiled. Curiosity tugged at me. I unlocked my phone one last time, telling myself it was only to check the time. But the feed opened automatically, and there they were, Sienna and Maxwell, standing under a floral arch worth more than most people's homes. She looked stunning. Radiant, poised, everything she'd dreamed of being. The comments gushed. A vision of grace. The perfect couple, fairy tale wedding. But in one close-up, her eyes betrayed her. They looked tired, rimmed with red, her smile slightly forced. Maybe from stress, maybe from knowing perfection costs more than it gives back. I stared at that image for a long time. You wanted me gone so you could shine, I whispered. But maybe you needed me there to make it real. I locked the phone, placed it face down in the drawer, and stepped out onto the balcony. The horizon stretched endlessly before me, the ocean whispering below like it had been waiting. The sun dipped lower, painting everything gold and rose. My reflection in the glass door shimmered faintly, the ivory dress behind me like a ghost of the past. I thought of Sienna's chandeliers, her glittering crowd, the applause. Then I looked at the ocean and felt something she never would peace without permission. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. Tomorrow morning she would wake up in her perfect world of roses and crystal, and I would wake up where light met water. Their story would end in applause. Mine was just beginning. I woke to the sound of waves curling against the shore, steady and rhythmic like the heartbeat of something ancient and alive. The air was warm and soft, scented with salt and plumeria. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the ocean through the sheer curtains, endless, glittering free, and I remembered. Hawaii. I slipped out of bed and walked barefoot to the balcony, wrapping a thin robe around myself. The sky was painted in slow-moving golds and pinks, the kind of dawn that makes you believe in starting over. The breeze brushed my skin, gentle but certain, like it knew I needed, reminding that life still moved forward. Somewhere, thousands of miles away, my sister's wedding hangover was probably setting in. But here the only thing that mattered was light. I stood there for a long time listening to the waves. They didn't demand or explain. They simply existed. I thought about that. For years, I'd been trying to earn space to be tolerated, accepted, noticed. But maybe the ocean had it right. Maybe the most powerful thing you can do is just exist unapologetically. When I finally went downstairs, Ethan was already on the terrace barefoot reading emails on his tablet. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. "You slept late." "First night in months I didn't dream about my family," I said, sitting down across from him. He closed his tablet, giving me his full attention. "That's progress." The waiter brought breakfast, fresh papaya coffee, something sweet and flaky dusted with sugar. The ocean stretched out beside us, calm and infinite. Ethan poured me coffee. "You know he said you don't have to post this trip or prove anything to them. They'll never see you the way you want them to." "I'm not doing this for them," I said, stirring my cup. "I'm doing it for the part of me they couldn't break." He smiled, quiet pride in his eyes. "That's my girl." His voice didn't sound possessive, it sounded proud. And for once, that didn't make me feel smaller. It made me feel seen. After breakfast, Leilani came by to introduce the photographer she'd mentioned in her email. Isabel was in her 40s, French, with sun-kissed skin, and a silver streak in her dark hair that made her look effortlessly elegant. She wore linen pants, no shoes, and a smile that felt like calm itself. So she said in her lilting accent, shaking my hand, "You're my sunrise." I laughed softly. "I guess I am," Leilani beamed. "Isabel has been here for years. She knows how to find the kind of light most people don't notice." Isabel nodded. "We won't pose too much. We'll let the moment do the work." "That sounds perfect." She studied me for a moment, head tilted. "You don't need to perform, Amelia. Just exist. The lens will find truth." Truth. The word landed somewhere deep inside me. "Truth is new territory," I said. "Then that's where we'll begin," she replied. That afternoon we walked through the property to scout locations, the cliffs overlooking the ocean, a small black sand cove hidden behind lava rocks, a grove of wild orchids where the light fell like rain. Isabel stopped often taking test shots, talking about how sunrise would change everything. I listened, my heart strangely light. When I tried on the ivory dress later, it caught the Hawaiian sun through the open window, glowing faintly. It wasn't extravagant. It was simple, elegant, alive. Every stitch carried something I had survived. I caught my reflection in the mirror and smiled faintly. "You've been waiting for this, haven't you?" I whispered. The dress didn't answer, but somehow I knew it had. For a second, my reflection blurred into a memory me at 21 standing in front of a mirror before a charity gala. Mom had hovered behind me, her voice cool and precise. "You should wear something lighter. Navy makes you look too serious." "I like serious," I'd said. She'd sighed. "You always have." I had taken the advice anyway, changed into the pale pink dress she preferred, spent the night smiling beside my sister, while people mistook me for a family friend. Now staring into this mirror years later, I whispered, "Soft isn't weakness," and I meant it. That evening I walked along the beach alone, camera in hand. The tide was low, the air heavy with the scent of hibiscus. I photographed small things, footprints disappearing into wet sand, children chasing the foam, an elderly couple walking hand in hand. They paused occasionally, pointing toward the horizon as if reminding each other that beauty still existed. Watching them, I realized something. This island didn't perform beauty. It simply was. It didn't need validation or applause. Maybe that was what I'd been missing all along, just being. When I returned to the villa, the sun was slipping low, and Ethan was sitting by the fire pit, a glass of wine in hand. He looked up as I approached. "You disappeared for hours." "I was chasing light," I said, sitting beside him. He smiled. "Did it let you catch it? Maybe it caught me." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the horizon fade into purples and blues. The fire crackled softly. "Do you still think about them?" he asked. I considered the question. Not in the same way. I used to want them to see me. Now I just want to see myself clearly. You already do, he said, voice quiet, certain. The words lingered in the air between us, tender and true. I looked at him then, not as a mirror for my worth, but as a witness to it. He didn't complete me. He reminded me I was already whole. A shooting star streaked across the sky. I smiled and whispered, "You think that's a sign? Maybe it's just the universe agreeing with you," he said. Later, when the fire burned low and the night grew thick with stars, I walked back to our suite. The ivory dress hung near the balcony, catching moonlight, like it was born to reflect it. I brushed my fingers along the fabric, tracing its delicate edges. Tomorrow I'd wear it under the sunrise. Tomorrow I'd stand in front of Isabel's camera, not as the forgotten daughter or the quiet sister, but as someone finally visible to herself. I laid the dress gently across the chair and sat on the bed writing in my notebook. I used to think revenge meant destruction, but maybe it just means reclaiming light. Outside, the waves whispered softly against the rocks. I left the balcony doors open, letting the night breeze carry the scent of salt and flowers into the room. Somewhere in California, my family's perfect world was probably still buzzing with leftover champagne and polite conversations about how lovely it all was. But here there was only stillness and me in it, unafraid. I glanced at the dress one last time before turning off the light. The moon glowed faintly on its folds, soft and unwavering. "Tomorrow," I whispered, "I won't need anyone's permission to shine." The ocean answered with another wave, slow and steady, as if promising it would be there to see me do exactly that. The alarm never had a chance to ring. I woke before it, heart steady, but alert, as if my body already knew this was the morning everything would shift. Outside, the world was still dark, wrapped in quiet. The ocean whispered beyond the cliffs, the sound low and ancient, steady as breath. I sat up, watching the faint silver outline of the horizon through the open curtains. It was 3:45 in the morning. Beside me, Ethan slept soundly, his hand resting near mine. For a long moment I watched him in the half-light, the peace on his face, the absence of pretense. He never asked me to change or to fit. He just stayed. I brushed his fingers gently, then whispered, "You don't know it yet, but this morning will change everything." I slipped from the bed and walked to where the ivory dress hung by the window. The fabric glowed even in darkness, as though it had been waiting for the Sunday. I touched it lightly, letting the cool silk slide between my fingers. I didn't feel nervous. I felt alive. At 4, Leilani and Isabel arrived, both moving softly through the room. The air smelled of sea salt and orchids. Isabel set her camera bag down with reverence, as if she were preparing for a ritual. "Good morning, sunshine," she whispered. "Not yet," I said, smiling. "But soon." The makeup artist worked quickly, brushing warmth across my cheeks, smoothing my hair into loose waves that would catch the wind. In the mirror, my reflection shifted not into someone else, but into someone I recognized. Someone who'd been buried under years of quiet compliance. The stylist pinned a small white plumeria in my hair. "You look like a bride," she said softly. "I am," I said, meeting my own eyes in the mirror, "just not the kind they'd understand." When the last pin was in place, I stepped into the dress. It clung perfectly soft against my skin, flowing to the floor like water made tangible. Isabel watched me with a small, knowing smile. "You're ready," she said. By the time we left, the horizon was a bruised gray blue, the kind of color that promises light but hasn't yet earned it. The car ride was quiet, the hum of the engine blending with the sound of waves crashing below the cliffs. I rested my forehead against the cool glass and whispered to myself. For years I tried to fit into their world of chandeliers and polite applause. Now I'm standing in the raw light of truth. Leilani parked near the edge of a narrow path. The air was cool, damp with salt. Isabel stepped out, first lifting her camera and taking a test shot toward the dim horizon. "The light waits for no one," she murmured. "Let's catch it." We walked toward the cliff's edge, where the land dropped steeply into the sea. The wind tugged at my hair at the hem of my dress, but it felt like encouragement. Isabel adjusted her lens, then looked up. "Don't pose," she said. "Just breathe." I stepped forward. The morning light spilled across the sheets, warm and soft, like the island itself was whispering me awake. I blinked against it, half expecting the usual heaviness that came with mornings back home, the dread, the noise in my chest. But here, there was only stillness. The sound of waves, the scent of coffee drifting in from the terrace, and the hum of life that didn't need anything from me. Ethan's voice floated through the open balcony door. He was on a call, laughing quietly, his words blending with the ocean breeze. I sat up slowly, the thin linen sheet sliding off my skin, and my eyes caught the photograph Isabel had left for me. It was printed on glossy paper, laid gently on the table. I picked it up, my fingers trembling just slightly. It was the sunrise shot, me standing on the cliff's arms, open toward the sea, the light catching the hem of my dress, as if the sun itself had chosen me. It didn't look like a photo. It looked like a memory I'd never had the courage to create, I whispered. That's who I was always supposed to be. I took a picture of the print with my phone, not thinking much of it. It was instinct, like capturing proof that the moment was real. When I walked onto the balcony, Ethan smiled and gestured to the table. Leilani sent breakfast, he said. Pineapple slices glistened on a white plate next to steaming coffee and flaky pastries dusted with sugar. I sat across from him. You know, I think I could live here forever, he grinned. You'd get bored. You need a skyline to photograph. Maybe I said sipping the coffee, but I could stay long enough to forget what cold feels like. He tilted his head. You're glowing today. It's called peace, I said softly. After he left for a quick meeting, I sat alone with my phone. I opened Instagram out of habit, scrolling past photos from Sienna's wedding. The official images had begun to appear, chandeliers, champagne, her perfect white gown framed by flowers that probably cost more than my apartment. Every image screamed control, every smile looked heavy. I looked at Isabel's photo again. The difference was impossible to miss. Hers was performance, mine was release. Without overthinking, I uploaded the photo. Caption, no invite, needed to stand in your own light. I stared at the words for a moment, before hitting post. Ethan appeared in the doorway just as I set the phone down. You finally posted just one picture, I said. For me. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and left me to the sound of waves. The first few notifications came slowly. A few likes from friends, a comment from Kara. You look like freedom. I laughed softly and closed the app. Ethan and I spent the day wandering through a local market, handmade jewelry, bright fabrics, fruit, so sweet it felt unreal. By the time we returned to the hotel, the sky had deepened into amber and violet, and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I plugged it in on the nightstand, curious. 2,000 likes, hundreds of comments, messages from people I didn't know. This is stunning. Who took this photo? It's art. I don't even know you, but this image made me cry. I scrolled through them, dazed. Isabel texted a few minutes later. Amelia, your photo is everywhere. Someone tagged it on a wedding blog. It's going viral. Viral. The word felt strange, distant, like something that happened to other people. Leilani messaged next. You started something, love. People are calling it the Sunrise Bride. I set the phone down and stared at the horizon outside the window, the moon rising above the ocean. I didn't feel pride so much as awe. I hadn't planned any of it. I just stood there and finally let myself exist. By morning, it was no longer just a post, it was a phenomenon. Bridal accounts had shared it, tagging designers and travel magazines. One caption read, "The new trend, solo bridal photo shoots celebrating independence and self-worth." The irony wasn't lost on me. My sister had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars for the perfect wedding spread. I had spent a few thousand to be left alone, and somehow that image was the one the world wanted to see. When I checked my messages, Isabel had sent a voice note, her French accent warm and amused. They are calling me non-stop. Agencies want to license the photo. They are calling you the Sunrise Bride. I think you just changed my career. I laughed, half disbelieving. You changed mine first, I texted back. But somewhere in California, things were unraveling. Kara sent me a screenshot from one of Sienna's bridal fan pages. My photo had been posted there by mistake, and the comments were merciless. "This is elegance. Why isn't this the real bride? Whoever she is, she looks free." Within hours, the comparison had spread. Sienna's PR team was scrambling to redirect attention. Mom had started calling mutual relatives, and Dad, according to Kara, hadn't said a word. Meanwhile, I was sitting barefoot on the balcony, sipping tea untouched by the chaos. For once, silence didn't mean exclusion. It meant peace. By the second evening, the photo appeared in an online lifestyle magazine under the headline, "The Solo Celebration That Captured the Internet's Heart." The article read, "While weddings often symbolize union, this image of a woman alone at sunrise reminds us that self-love can be just as sacred." When Ethan showed me the article, I laughed until I nearly cried. "You realize that's the same magazine that covered Sienna's wedding last year?" He grinned. "Looks like they found a better story." I shook my head, still smiling. "She spent $700,000 for a story. I just showed up for mine." "The universe has its own PR department," he said. The photo hit every corner of the internet within days. Photographers called it iconic. A jewelry brand reached out wanting to collaborate on a Freedom line. Isabel got 3 new clients in a single afternoon, and me, I mostly watched in disbelief, caught between gratitude and guilt. I hadn't meant for any of this. I hadn't tried to hurt anyone. But there it was, the quiet kind of justice that didn't need my permission to unfold. I sat by the water that evening, the tide brushing over my toes, and thought about the girl I'd been just weeks earlier. The invisible one, the too serious daughter, the one left off the guest list. "They erased me," I whispered. And somehow the world wrote me back in. I pulled out my phone to text Isabel. "You didn't just take my photo. You gave me back my reflection." She replied almost immediately, "No, Amelia. You just decided to face it." Her words stayed with me long after the screen dimmed. That night the island was quiet. Somewhere across the ocean my sister was still performing her version of perfection, but her spotlight had burned too bright too fast. I'd seen the comments, how people were already calling her wedding pretentious, how even her husband had turned off his tags. While Sienna was posing for photographers in Napa, I was sitting beside Ethan on the sand, our feet buried in the cool earth. No lights, no applause, no comparisons, just us breathing the same night air. "She wanted a perfect picture," I said softly. "I wanted peace. Turns out only one of us got both." He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "And she can't buy what you found." I smiled. "No, she can't." Later, back in our room, I plugged in my phone one last time. Notifications still flooded the screen, but one message stood out, a text from Mom. "We need to talk." I stared at it for a long time, my reflection faint in the darkened glass. The old me would have answered right away, desperate to explain, to soothe, to earn forgiveness I didn't owe. Instead, I locked the screen and set the phone face down on the table. For once I murmured, "She can wait." The ocean roared softly beyond the windows, steady and sure, like applause meant only for me. The ocean was quiet that morning, soft waves curling over sand like whispered prayers. I sat on the balcony with my coffee, watching the horizon turn from silver to gold. It had been 3 days since the photo went viral, 3 days since the world decided to celebrate the woman I'd fought to become. For the first time in years, my reflection didn't look like someone waiting to be chosen. The phone rang, cutting through the calm. I almost didn't answer, but the screen said, "Mom and old habits die hard." Her voice was sharp, brittle around the edges. "Amelia, what on earth were you thinking?" I didn't speak at first. I wanted her to hear how still I was. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she pressed on. "Sienna's devastated. You embarrassed this family. You made her wedding look honest," I said quietly. Her breath caught. "Don't get clever with me. The timing of that photo, how could you be so cruel? I posted it 2 days after her wedding, Mom. People found it on their own. That's not cruelty, that's visibility." You knew it would draw attention, she snapped. It was selfish. You've always been jealous of Sienna's success, and now you've taken her moment. I almost laughed, but it came out as something sadder. You mean the moment I wasn't invited to? Don't twist this, she said, her tone cracking under pressure. We were trying to protect her. From what I interrupted? From me existing? From me breathing the same air in a photo? The silence that followed was thick years of tension condensed into a single beat. Finally, she said, "You've embarrassed us. Everyone is talking about you instead of her. You've ruined everything." I stood up leaning against the railing watching the sunlight glitter on the water. You can't ruin what's fake, Mom. You can only expose it. Don't talk to me like that, she hissed. You sound just like your father when he gets self-righteous. Maybe that's because I finally stopped sounding like you. I ended the call before she could answer. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from release. Years of biting my tongue had finally ended with a click. The phone rang again. This time it was Sienna. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. Her voice was raw, the kind of sharp that comes from exhaustion. You ruined my wedding. I wasn't even in the same country, Sienna. You know what I mean, she snapped. Everyone's talking about your stupid photo. Every magazine that covered my wedding is posting about you instead. My PR manager said, "Your picture has more engagement than our official photos," I exhaled slowly. Maybe people were looking for something real. Real, she spat. You think standing on a beach in a cheap dress makes you real? It wasn't cheap, I said softly. It was mine. There was a pause, then a bitter laugh. You did this on purpose. You waited for my big moment just to what I interrupted. To remind you I exist. You didn't need my help for that, Sienna. You erased me years ago. That's not true. It is I, said my voice steady now. You wanted me gone so you could shine. You forgot light doesn't disappear. It just finds its own way back. For a second, all I heard was her breathing. Then a whisper that almost sounded like regret. Why couldn't you just let me have this? I did, I said. I let you have everything. The attention, the applause, the love. I finally took what was left myself. She hung up. I stood there for a while, letting the silence fill the space she'd left behind. The waves rolled in slow and certain, each one erasing the last. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again, Dad this time. His voice was tired, softer than I remembered. Your mother and sister are upset, he began. They think you did this deliberately. I don't believe that. I didn't plan any of it, I said. But I also didn't hide. Maybe that's what bothers them, he sighed. Your mother? She wanted everything to look perfect. You know how she is. I know, I said. That's the problem. She cares more about how things look than how they feel. He hesitated. We just wanted peace. Peace, I repeated quietly. That's what you called it when you stayed silent. I should have stood up for you, he admitted. When she said you shouldn't come to the wedding, I should have said something. You didn't, I said simply. No, he said. And I'm sorry. The words hung in the air, fragile but real. For the first time, I didn't feel small in his silence. Dad, I said finally, this isn't about a wedding. It's about a lifetime of pretending I didn't belong. I just stopped pretending. I know, he said, his voice breaking. And I'm proud of you even if your mother can't say it yet. When the call ended, I sat on the bed staring out at the ocean. The tide had crept closer, foaming white against black rock. For years, I whispered, I thought peace meant staying quiet. But peace isn't silence. It's not surrender. It's knowing I don't have to fight anymore. That evening, Isabel called. Amelia, you're on the cover of Bridal Dreams, she said, breathless with excitement. They want to feature you and the story behind the photo. They're calling it The Sunrise Bride, the woman who rewrote the meaning of celebration. I smiled. That's your art they're celebrating, Isabel, she laughed softly. No, that's you. I just caught it with my lens. When the call ended, I walked down to the beach barefoot. The sky was streaked with orange and rose, the waves shimmering in gold. My phone buzzed again, texts from Kara this time. screenshots of news headlines and social posts. A viral photo that made the internet question what celebration really means. Another headline. While one wedding chased perfection, another woman found authenticity. And then one more. Sources confirm the Grant Blake's wedding spread has been postponed indefinitely. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just felt a quiet kind of understanding, the kind that comes when justice no longer needs to be loud. The house they built on appearances had finally cracked, and I hadn't lifted a finger. Later that night, Dad texted again. "We'd like to see you when you're home. To talk." I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Maybe one day." When it's not about guilt, I put the phone down and walked toward the water. The moonlight scattered across the surface like silver dust. I let the waves reach my ankles, cool and steady. I whispered into the wind, "Forgiveness doesn't mean going back." The ocean answered with another wave pulling softly at the shore as if agreeing. I stood there, the salt air clinging to my skin, and thought of the girl I used to be. The one who waited for permission for love that had to be earned. "She's gone," I murmured. "And I hope they know what they lost when they chose not to see her." Behind me, the resort lights glowed faintly against the dark sky, but I didn't look back. I walked farther into the surf until the waves reached my knees. The water was warm, alive. "They built their story on silence," I said quietly. "Mine begins with light." And for the first time in my life, the only sound that mattered was the ocean clapping softly in agreement. The magazine lay open on the cafe table, the ocean breeze turning its glossy pages as if the island itself were curious. My photo covered the front, the sunrise bride redefining celebration. My hair caught in the wind, my arms open to the light. I remembered that morning clearly, the taste of salt in the air, the quiet between waves. But seeing it here framed and captioned like some grand statement felt strange. I hadn't meant to start anything. I just wanted to stop disappearing. The waitress passed by, smiling shyly. "That's you, isn't it?" she asked. I nodded. "It is." "You look free," she said. "Not just beautiful, free." I thanked her, but as she walked away, I stared at my reflection in the window and wondered when freedom had become a headline. A week earlier, I'd done the interview with Bridal Dreams over a video call. The journalist Melissa was kind and calm, asking questions that went deeper than the usual fluff. "What made you take that trip to Hawaii?" she'd asked. I was tired of waiting for permission, I'd told her. To be seen, to celebrate, to exist. I realized I didn't need anyone's approval to feel worthy. She had smiled, softly typing as I spoke. "You make vulnerability sound like victory." Maybe it was. Now, as I sipped my coffee, notifications buzzed endlessly on my phone. Messages from strangers flooded in. "You reminded me, I matter too. I was the invisible daughter once. Thank you for showing us how to heal. I've booked my own solo trip. You changed something in me." I scrolled through hundreds, then thousands, overwhelmed. Somewhere online, women had started using a hashtag number, "Celebrate Yourself." It was spreading fast. Photos of women in gardens, on beaches, even in office cubicles, holding up coffee mugs like trophies. No filters, no perfection, just truth. I set the phone down, staring out at the waves. I'd gone to Hawaii to reclaim my story, but now it belonged to so many others. And maybe that was how healing worked. It rippled outward like light on water. Later that afternoon, my agent called. "Amelia, you're trending worldwide. TV networks are calling podcasts, even a jewelry company wanting to collaborate. You're a phenomenon. I'm not a product," I said gently. "Let's be careful about this." She hesitated. "You could use this moment. Build something bigger." "Maybe I already have," I said. "Something quieter." After we hung up, I told Ethan about the offers. He looked at me over the rim of his coffee cup. "Choose carefully," he said. "You don't owe anyone your pain." I smiled. "I'm not selling it." That evening, Isabel called from Paris. "You've made me famous again," she laughed. "Every photographer in Europe wants to recreate your shoot. But you, your story, what's happening to you is special. Don't let anyone brand your truth. I thought about that long after the call ended. It wasn't fame I felt. It was peace. 2 weeks later, I found myself in a TV studio in Los Angeles, lights hot against my skin. The show's host, a polished woman in her 50s with kind eyes, smiled across from me. "Today we're speaking with Amelia Parker," she said to the camera. "You may know her as the Sunrise Bride, the woman whose photo sparked a global conversation about self-worth and celebration. Amelia, welcome." I smiled. "Thank you for having me." The host leaned forward. "People see your story as revenge against your family." Was it? I paused, letting the question breathe. "No," I said finally. "It wasn't revenge. It was survival. It was love, the kind I finally gave myself." The audience was quiet, listening. "I didn't set out to make a statement," I continued. "I just wanted to celebrate a life that no one else thought was worth noticing. And if my sister's wedding taught me anything, it's that peace looks different on everyone. Mine just happened to wear an ivory dress at sunrise." Applause filled the room, soft but sincere. I saw women in the audience wiping their eyes. After the segment aired, messages multiplied again. Stories from women in their 60s, 70s, even teens. One wrote, "I watched you on TV while making dinner. My husband laughed and said you looked lonely. I told him no, that's what strength looks like." That night my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. A text from Sienna. "Saw your interview. You looked happy." I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, then I typed 3 words, "I hope you are too." But before hitting send, I deleted it. Some conversations didn't need words. The next morning, Leilani met me in the hotel lobby. She handed me a white orchid lei. "For peace," she said. I didn't mean to start something, I told her. She smiled. "Real change never starts on purpose. It starts when someone tells the truth." Her words stayed with me as I boarded my flight home. Back in Los Angeles, my inbox overflowed with invitations, a women's conference, a publishing house, a film documentary proposal. But one email stood out from the Women's Empowerment Summit. They wanted me to give the keynote speech. I hesitated. Speaking wasn't my thing. I'd spent most of my life trying to be invisible. But Ethan encouraged me. "You're not performing," he said. "You're sharing light. And there's a room full of women who need to hear it." So I said yes. The day of the summit, the ballroom was filled with hundreds of women CEOs, teachers, mothers, students, all waiting quietly. I stood behind the curtain, heart pounding, palms sweating. When they called my name, I stepped into the spotlight. The room hushed. I took a deep breath and began. For a long time, I believed my worth was measured by how much space I didn't take up. I thought being quiet was the same as being kind. That being overlooked was easier than being disliked. But silence doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps you small. The audience leaned in. They told me I was too serious, too plain, too independent. But that's what the world says to women who don't play by its script. I thought I needed an invitation to exist beautifully. Turns out I only needed to show up. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. Women stood clapping, some crying, others smiling through tears. I looked out at them and felt something warm and unshakable in my chest. I hadn't come to be adored. I'd come to tell the truth. Afterward, women lined up to hug me. One whispered, "You made me feel less alone." Another said, "I've been waiting 50 years to hear someone say that." That night, back in my hotel room, I finally checked my phone. Among hundreds of messages was one from my father. "I saw your speech. You were brave. I wish I'd had your courage years ago." I stared at the words, heart swelling and aching all at once. Then I typed back, "It's never too late to find it." For the first time, I didn't feel angry anymore, just free. Later, standing before the mirror, I studied the woman looking back. The same eyes, same mouth, but the reflection was new. Not softer, not harder, just whole. "I didn't win because they lost," I whispered. "I won because I finally chose myself." Outside, the city lights shimmered like faraway stars. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look. The world could wait. Somewhere, online women were still posting their own sunrise photos with the hashtag number Celebrate Yourself. Isabel was back in Paris capturing new stories of strength. Ethan was waiting downstairs, smiling like he'd known all along this was who I was meant to be. And me, I finally understood. Sometimes revenge isn't about payback. It's about becoming the woman they can never silence again. The morning light in Los Angeles was softer than in Hawaii, muted and slow as if even the sun wanted to give me a moment to rest. I woke to the faint hum of the city outside my hotel window and the lingering echo of applause still ringing in my mind. The summit had ended, but its weight remained not heavy, not exhausting, but full. I made tea and sat by the window watching the early commuters blur past below. The world was moving on, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was trying to catch up. Peace felt unfamiliar but right. I thought about what I'd said in my speech the night before, about choosing myself, about letting go of needing permission. Now, sitting here in the quiet, I realized something I hadn't said aloud. Closure doesn't come when someone says they're sorry. It comes when you stop waiting for them to. A knock at the door broke my thoughts. The front desk clerk handed me a small brown package. "Forwarded from your agency," he said. Inside was a neat stack of envelopes tied with twine. Letters, real ones, handwritten in ink that had smudged in places. Most were from strangers, women thanking me, mothers telling me they'd shown their daughters my photo, one even enclosing a pressed daisy with a note that said, "For the woman who reminded us we're still growing." I smiled reading through them one by one. But two envelopes made my breath catch, both familiar. One was my mother's handwriting, careful, controlled, slanted to the right. The other Sienna's, slightly messy, looping, impatient even on paper. For a long time I just stared at them. I wasn't sure I wanted to know what they said. When I finally opened my mother's letter, the faint scent of her perfume drifted up rose and talc, the same one she'd worn since I was a child. The first lines were formal, almost rehearsed. "Amelia, I saw the interviews, the speeches, the magazine. I can't say I understand everything you've done, but I suppose I should try. Things got complicated. We didn't mean to hurt you. Sienna's wedding was fragile. You know how your sister can be. I thought it was better to keep the peace." I read that line twice. Keep the peace, the same excuse she'd used my entire life to justify choosing silence over fairness. But further down, the handwriting grew shakier. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe peace isn't silence. Maybe I confused order with love. I only know that watching you now, seeing how people respond to you, I realize I never truly saw you. For that, I'm sorry in my way. It wasn't a perfect apology. It was part confession, part defense. But for her, it was something, a hairline crack in a wall that had stood for decades. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside me. My chest ached not with anger, but with the kind of sadness that feels almost gentle. Then I picked up Sienna's letter. Her handwriting slanted and uneven ink blotched at the corners. "I don't know where to start," it began. "Maybe with the truth. I was jealous. I always was. You never asked for attention, but people liked you anyway. I had to earn it, buy it, beg for it. I thought being the golden one meant being loved, but it was just being seen, and only when I was perfect." She admitted her marriage was already unraveling. He loved the version of me that smiled for the cameras. The rest of me bored him. Then near the end, when I saw that photo of you, the one that went viral, I hated you for it. Not because you stole the spotlight, but because you looked free. I've never felt that in my life. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know you were never the problem. I was. My throat tightened. I reread the lines until the words blurred. Sienna's honesty wasn't elegant, but it was real, and that made it beautiful. Later that afternoon, I walked to a small park down the street, the letters tucked in my bag. The jacaranda trees were in bloom, purple petals falling like soft rain across the path. I found a bench beneath one of them and sat there, letting the air settle around me. I read both letters again, slower this time, listening to the rhythm of my heartbeat between the sentences. For the first time I saw my mother and sister, not as villains, but as women trapped in their own fears. She spent her life being seen but never known, I whispered, thinking of Sienna. And, Mom. She confused control with love. The wind picked up scattering petals across my lap. I brushed them away gently and whispered, I forgive you. No one heard it. Maybe that was the point. Forgiveness wasn't for them. It was for the part of me that had been waiting to exhale. That night I sat at the hotel desk and pulled out my notebook. I wrote 2 short letters not to send but to release. To my mother, I understand now. We both mistook silence for peace. I hope one day we can speak without hurting each other. Until then, I wish you calm. To Sienna, you're free. So am I. We don't have to keep living in comparison. I hope one day when the noise fades, you find your own sunrise. I tucked both notes between the pages of my journal. Some words were meant to heal the writer, not the reader. The next evening, as I was preparing to fly back to Hawaii, my father called. His voice was softer than I remembered. I won't keep you long, he said. I just wanted to see you before you go. We met in the lobby cafe. He looked older, smaller somehow, his once proud shoulders slumped. For a while, we just sat there, the sound of cups clinking around us. I saw your speech, he said finally. You were right. Silence is a choice. And I made the wrong one. I studied him. You can still choose differently. He nodded, his eyes glossy. I want to. I don't know how yet, but I want to. We didn't say much after that. But when he stood to leave, he squeezed my hand. That small gesture, simple, awkward, sincere, said what words never had. Later that night, I walked down to the beach one last time before my flight. I brought the letters with me. The sky was streaked in lavender and gold, the ocean humming against the shore. I tore the edges of each letter piece by piece and let the wind take them. The paper fluttered, caught the light, and drifted into the sea. I thought forgiveness meant letting them back in, I whispered. But it just meant letting myself out. The waves rolled over my feet, warm and steady, and I felt the last remnants of anger dissolve into something softer. When I returned to the hotel, my phone buzzed. Isabel's name flashed on the screen. You won't believe this, she said excitedly. Numbers celebrate yourself, just past 1 million posts. Women all over the world, every age, every language. It's incredible. I smiled. It started with a sunrise. It started with you, she corrected. After we hung up, I opened my journal again. On a fresh page, I wrote, revenge was never about hurting them. It was about proving I could live without permission. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of self. I closed the notebook and looked out the window. The city lights shimmered faintly against the dark like reflections of distant stars. They taught me to stay quiet, I said softly. I turned that quiet into a language the whole world could hear. Outside, somewhere beyond the glass, a breeze rose, gentle, persistent, alive, carrying the faint scent of salt and jacaranda into the night. The sand was cool beneath my feet when I stepped onto the beach again. The same beach where it all began, where I'd stood in that ivory dress facing the sunrise, with trembling hands and a heart full of quiet defiance. But this time, I wasn't trembling. I wasn't chasing light. I was carrying it. A full year had passed since that morning. Hawaii looked the same, but I wasn't the same woman who had stood on these shores back then. I'd returned not to reclaim something, but to thank the place that had given me everything I didn't know. I needed freedom, voice, peace. The air smelled of salt and plumeria. I closed my eyes and breathed it in, letting the sound of the tide roll through me. Full circle, I whispered. At a small cafe overlooking the ocean, I sat with my laptop and a cup of coconut coffee. The barista recognized me, though she didn't say anything at first. A few minutes later, she shyly set down a small dish of banana bread beside my coffee. It's on the house, she said. For the woman from the sunrise. I smiled, touched. Thank you. When she left, I opened my browser to check the Celebrate Yourself page. Thousands of new posts had appeared overnight. Women from all over the world, some in their 20s, Others, well into their 70s, were sharing photos and small confessions. A widow celebrating her first solo vacation. A cancer survivor smiling at her reflection. A grandmother in a sundress dancing barefoot in her garden. The hashtag had taken on a life of its own. It wasn't about me anymore. It belonged to them now, to anyone who'd ever been overlooked, silenced, or told their worth depended on someone else's approval. As I scrolled, I saw one post that made me stop. A woman my mother's age standing in her backyard holding a sign that read, "I finally said no. And I'm proud." I felt tears press behind my eyes. Connection, I thought. That was what it meant to be seen. Not for the applause, but for the recognition, the unspoken me too that crosses oceans. Back in my villa, a stack of forwarded mail waited on the desk. Among the fan letters and media requests, one envelope caught my eye, cream-colored, addressed in careful, familiar handwriting. Sienna. My hands were steady as I opened it this time. Dear Amelia, I don't know if this will reach you or if you'll even want to read it, but I need you to know I've been trying. I started therapy. I'm learning who I am without the applause, without the perfect photos. I thought success would save me, but all it ever did was hide me. Watching you walk away that day, I thought I'd won, but now I understand you weren't leaving. You were becoming. You taught me something I wish I'd learned earlier, that we both deserved love that wasn't earned by performance. I still have a lot to fix, but if you're ever ready, I'd like to start over. Not as rivals, just as sisters. Love, Sienna. I sat there for a long time, the letter resting on my knees, the sound of the ocean outside the window. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry. I just felt a quiet, grateful ache, the kind that comes when a wound finally closes. I don't know if I'm ready, I said softly to the room. But maybe someday. That evening, as the sky melted into gold, my phone rang. Dad, hi, sweetheart, he said, his voice gentler than I remembered. I heard you're back on the island. I am, I said. Needed a little more sunlight, he chuckled. Your mother's been asking about you. I hesitated. How is she slower these days, he admitted. But softer, too. She talks about you. Says she's proud, though you know she'll never quite say it out loud. I smiled. That sounds like her. She's watching your interviews, he said. Every single one. And she keeps clipping the articles about you. I think, in her way, she's trying to understand. I stared out at the sea. Tell her I'm okay, I said. She knows, he said. And so do I. We both are. After the call, I sat in the fading light for a while, the horizon glowing pink and orange. There were no tears, no regret. Just peace. The kind that doesn't shout, it hums quietly beneath the skin. The next morning, Isabel arrived in Hawaii for a photography workshop. We met at dawn just as the light began to rise. She hugged me tightly, her laughter as effortless as ever. I had to see you again, she said. Do you realize what you started? The movement, the foundation, the stories. It's extraordinary. I smiled. It's not mine anymore. It's theirs. She tilted her head. That's what makes it beautiful. We walked down to the beach, the same cliffs where she had taken that famous photo. Isabel carried her camera, but this time there was no posing, no perfection to chase. She snapped a few candid shots while I laughed, my hair tangled in the wind. For the woman who no longer needs perfect lighting, she said, lowering the camera. I grinned. That might be the best photo yet. Later that day, I met Hannah, a young woman who worked part-time at the cafe. She told me she wanted to be a photographer but couldn't afford the tuition. She reminded me of myself, determined, creative, afraid to dream too loudly. That night, I wrote a note and slipped it into an envelope with a small card from the Celebrate Yourself Foundation. Inside was a scholarship letter and one of my old cameras. When she opened it the next day, she cried. Why would you do this for me, she asked. Because someone once helped me find my light, I said. Now it's your turn. She hugged me, and I realized this was the truest kind of revenge. Not payback, not even triumph. It was giving others what I'd once needed most: belief. At sunset, I returned to the shoreline one last time. The sky was molten gold, the air soft and warm. In my hands was the ivory dress from that first photo shoot. I hadn't worn it since. I folded it carefully, tied it with a ribbon, and walked into the water until the waves brushed my knees. "This isn't goodbye," I whispered, "just letting go." I let the dress float into the surf, the fabric catching the light before drifting away. It wasn't loss, it was release. The sun dipped lower, setting the ocean on fire. I felt the salt on my skin, the rhythm of the waves around me, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone to notice. I was simply alive, uninvited, unashamed, unafraid. For years, I whispered, I thought revenge was something you take. But maybe it's something you become. Later, sitting by the window, I opened my notebook. On a fresh page I wrote, "For every woman who was told she was too quiet, too old, too late, you are not invisible, you are infinite. And the light you've been waiting for is already yours." I closed the book and looked out at the stars beginning to flicker above the sea. They taught me to stay quiet. I turned that quiet into a voice the world could hear. The waves rolled on endless and sure, carrying my story with them, not as a cry for justice but as a hymn for every woman who had ever been told to stay small. And in that sound I heard everything I'd been searching for: peace.